that when it comes to the black community, to me, I can't get through 250 years of slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow, 60 years of disparity. Don't tell me these events are not related to each other. Sometimes what you have in the black community is over policing. So, for example, for you all know, so crack cocaine in the United States, there are whole states where no white person was ever charged with crack, none. And so, like, is that so? Now we want to say, the black folks are in the crack. Whoa. The CDC says that everybody uses dope, but you only look for drug addicts in this neighborhood. Now that is a driver. Let me also say that black people are overwhelmingly represented in the exonerated job. What does that mean? That means there's a lot of black people convicted of crimes that they didn't commit. They commit these Central Park 5. Now, none of this am I saying. Now, John, hold on. I'm not saying black people don't commit crime. I'm saying black people commit crime for the same reason everybody else commit crime. But I'm also saying, given our nation's racial history and past, that we are also unfairly targeted for law enforcement, particularly.
Welcome.
If you go back to, just use rape for a minute. How many black men between 1865 and 1925 actually raped some white woman? They didn't.
One, I don't know.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that part of why you have black criminality is just some people are just, they don't care about others and they only care about themselves.
Keith, very quickly. What I fail to understand, and I really mean it's something that always perplexes me. I hear everything you're saying. You are more moved in your gut by Liz Collin and Derek Chauvin and the kind of discrimination that you're talking about. That moves you more than the fact, and I'm sure you're aware of this fact. Yes, there are evil people everywhere, but in the typical American city where there's a significant number of black people, black men commit a vastly disproportionate number of homicides. Vastly disproportionate. Mostly upon each other, but that doesn't exonerate it. The issue is not white people kill white people and black people kill black people. Why do black people kill so many black people? It seems to me that doesn't bother you very much. I'm politely asking you why.
No, let me just tell you this. I think that you're incorrect about that. I think, here's the thing.
This is not a debate. This is a fight.
Between law enforcement committing murder and private citizens committing murder. What's the difference? One is, one has the imprimatur of the state, and the other is a criminal who let me remind you, bro.
I've never understood this argument.
Say again?
I've heard that. I've never understood it. I don't get it. Maybe I lack legal training or something. And it's always imprimatur.
No, you don't need legal training. You don't need legal training. It's just, take a line from Ghostbusters. If a private citizen commits a crime, who are you going to call? The police. What if the police commit a crime? Now you're calling on the agents of the state who have a responsibility and obligations under the Fourth Amendment, right? And so it is, to me, more negatively impactful for democracy.
Miss Jackson doesn't care about that. When her son gets killed, I don't get it.
But you're answering a question that's really not. You're asking a good question, but that's not the question. You're asking me, why is it that one kind of recurrent killing gets attention and another doesn't get nearly as much? But here's the thing, John, you don't live in Minneapolis, so what you don't know is that I prosecute murderers all the time, man. Every day and all the time.
Your heart doesn't seem to bleed.
Why does it need? Well, how do you know though, John? I mean, here's the problem.
Well, tell us then, because and by the way, Alpha News is the name of the organization that produced that documentary.
The Black Conservative and
John is talking about affect.
And the prosecutor
Passion.
of Derek Chauvin.
About leadership. And when you're facing such violence in our own community committed by our own people, we look to someone like you, an African-American elected official, to frame that issue in a way that puts some responsibility on the community to address what's going on among ourselves, regardless of whether or not it's caused in some long historical story by slavery and Jim Crow and whatnot. And how do you react to that?
Right.
Well, I'll be happy to react to it. But if you ask me why people are dying at the hands of law enforcement, we have an obligation to safeguard those same people, and why I have another kind of emotional reaction when a private citizen commits a crime against another private citizen. The answer is one has a systemic problem with solving, and the other does not have a systemic problem with solving. So, in other words, there was recently, if you guys got any kind of ability to search anything right now, search the name Zaria McKeever. ZARIA McKeever. You can look it up right now if you're able.
Zaria McKeever.
Is that a man who was an adult organized two teenagers to go into the home of his ex girlfriend and father of his child, and he organized them, supplied them with guns, gave them a ride, gave them material clothing so they could obscure their identity, and they broke into her house, and they were looking for the boyfriend to harm. He ran out the back. She tried to calm the two guys down because they knew the two shooters were after the boyfriend, and they shot her 6 times and murdered her. Now, the local prosecutor was going to say, because juveniles don't have enough brain development, we're going to treat them within the juvenile system. I listened to the victim, I listened to the family, I listened to the black churches, and I went to the governor and I said, Governor, you have the authority to hand me this case. And I took that case, and we're prosecuting those people right now. Now, you guys don't know about that case because you're not from Minnesota, but let me tell you, listening to what happened to that family and that
wow, I have 15 people for the first time on YouTube. Thank you for coming, man. Can you guys like and share the thing?
I myself in trouble with a bunch of other prosecutors because they don't like the AG taking their cases, and I don't plan on taking their cases. But that case, I could not abide. In the community, that young woman, I mean, look, the family, if that case would have went down, if that kid would have got 18 to 24 months of juvenile, he would have been in the line at Target with that girl's father in a short period of time. He represents a terror to the community, to the family. I took that case, I prosecuted. Here's another one. I didn't even take this case criminal. I took this case civil. There's a young woman named Wiley. Her name is oh my God. Her last name is Wiley. Beautiful young woman, and she was just out partying. She's a veterinary technician, and she was shot. Markeisha Wiley, and she was at a party, and some idiots started shooting at each other. Yeah, they were African American guys. She catches a bullet. She's not even a target. Now, one of the guns that ends up shooting with her on the scene is a gun that was sold by a straw purchaser. What is that? That's somebody who has a clean record, who buys guns from a legitimate source and sells them to criminals. But in my opinion, this guy bought so many guns from the same store that they should have been on notice that they were, in my view, they were negligently selling guns.
Bruh.
And the end result was harm to people on that scene, including Markeisha Wiley. So, I'm holding them accountable. So I'm just telling you that you guys are media savvy. You know that not everything important is in the media, and not everything in the media is important. And so, yes, I do believe that we must prosecute and hold accountable people who commit heinous crimes. I believe that there is a disproportionate impact. And if you want to talk about somebody here's racism,
I have to interrupt you briefly for a second. Can you tell us about a time when you were involved with a case where it was white guys who took out a bunch of guns at a party and somebody named Kaylee caught a bullet? Does that ever happen?
Well,
everything is racial.
You notice that it doesn't. This is what I'm saying. I mean, I'm sure it's happened, but it's
John,
much
you
more
gotta
rare.
agree with me. Nearly every mass shooting, not all, but most mass shootings are white guys, right?
You're stepping away from my question. I'm talking about this party scenario, which unfortunately is
Right.
endemic in the black community. Yes, if somebody does a mass shooting,
It's both way. You're saying that on one side, the white people, you know, like in mass shooting, is almost 90% is white people, and in crime, petty crime, 90% are black people. So I don't see the issue here.
almost always a white guy. That's true. But I'm talking about Kaylee getting killed at a party with a bunch of, white guys. And you've never dealt with a case like that.
Okay, you never also dealt with the case where, well, it's very rare that a black person commit a mass shooting in a school or something like that. So,
And
No,
I'm
you're
just
right.
saying, that
That one
is
hasn't come across my
it's
desk yet.
worrisome to me as the things that you're talking about, and I just can't bring myself to associate that disproportion with slavery, Jim Crow, and redlining. There comes a point when you're wondering, what do we do about it now? That's all.
Is there anything going on in black culture, in the nature of our community, in fatherless homes, and in the values that kids are embracing, in gang culture and so forth like that? I mean, I'm just
all of this argument about gang cultures, I'm not from here, but all of this argument that they're putting, you cannot, there has to be a cause. So the slavery and the Jim Crow, all of this is can be the cause of why you have gang, why you have all of this shit that is shooting that is happening. The lack of opportunity in the black neighborhood. You know, I'm not from here, but I went to the black neighborhood and I saw what is happening. So, it's a lot of things. It's not just out of nowhere that people start shooting.
Well, let me just tell you this, man. I think that if you want to fix the problem, there's other more effective places to start. And I think if you want to talk about fathers' homes, that there's some real things we can do about it. But for me, here's where you guys and me probably do kind of separate, and that is, for me, fatherless homes are a tragedy because I grew up in a house with a father. My dad is 95, and I might go get on a plane to Detroit to see him soon. And so I grew up in an intact family. And so, that's a lucky, very fortunate, blessed, situation.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. But my point is, I don't think that if you want to talk about African American dysfunction and violent crime, I believe that there are other more effective things to do in the short term. Let's start with school absenteeism. We've had a dramatic increase in auto thefts in the last few years, right?
Yeah.
And we also know that a lot of the thieves are young. And we also know that a lot of them are not back in school. And we know that because of the digital divide, there were kids who didn't have any school-related structure since 2020. Now, we did have a worldwide pandemic, which I don't think the government should or could have ignored, but it did have residual impacts, particularly in this area. I think if you could get school absenteeism down and get kids back in the classroom, no matter what, even if they're not learning that much, there is a socialization and structuring that will put a damper on juvenile crime and will save lives in many areas, including and let's talk about auto thefts, for example. There are things that we can do, like even school lunch will draw kids back to school. School breakfast will draw back them to school. We have a real serious housing shortage in nearly every city. You can improve the quality of life of that kid. I believe school. You guys are really going to hate me saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I believe in school integration. I believe that we should integrate schools. I believe they have better outcomes.
Wait, we're not against that, man. I mean, John can speak for himself
on that. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so let me just tell you, man. There's a good dude named Rucker Johnson. He's an academic, and I think y'all ought to read his work. What he shows is that if you segregate schools, and a lot of these charters are segregation academies, in my view, then there's and you compare them to integrated schools, that you're not only going to improve better outcomes for Black kids, you're going to improve better social outcomes for all kids, and you're going to have an America where people feel much more like each other's fellow citizen than if you have this formative experience that was only this way or that way.
Well, I hit a wall.
So that's
on
your
that.
take on charters? Charters are
I
bad
can't
because they
speak beyond
segregate
that.
kids?
Well,
Here's nothing
What
with
about all
charters.
the evidence that charters raise the test scores of the kids and that the kids in the waiting
All
line who
that
don't
fits
get into the
together?
charters do so much worse than the kids
Watching
who
each
do?
other excel, that is hard for me to think past, Keith. Wow.
Well, let me just tell you, man.
I didn't know that's what you mean.
No, what I mean is, if we had not abandoned the drive for school desegregation, and if we coupled it with residential integration as well, and just fair housing, right? We would be in a better. We would have a more unified society with better Black student outcomes than we did now. We abandoned this experiment in about the mid 1970s. Certainly by 80, we were done with it, and it has not helped our country. We would be better off if we fulfilled the promises of Brown. And when it comes to
remove that shit.
When they said we had to integrate schools in Virginia, they closed out everybody's school, right? And what I'm saying
A long
is,
time ago. Yeah.
yeah, it's a long time ago. But you know what? I think it's within the lifetime of at least 1 out of 3 people on this call. And look, and I personally remember the big fights in Boston, in other places.
I came across a study the other day that surprised me. It was the first study I've ever seen that resoundingly confirmed that busing ever did any real good. I used to not be aware of a single study that showed that it helped. And by accident, I found one the other day, and I thought, wow, there actually is a study that shows that somehow what happened in Massachusetts was a good thing for at least some people. But that's not enough evidence for me. I think I would have initiated that experiment. I can tell why people thought it should have been done, but I'm not sure it helped any Black lives in enough of a way for all of that agita intention, racist whether it was or not, to have been worth it.
Read Rucker Johnson.
I will.
I'd say Reed Johnson. And so here's the thing. Walk with me for a second. If you say that this group of people, Blacks, for example, must live in a certain part of the city, then if school is basically, you go to the schools you're close to, then we can reduce the quality of your education because we control where you live. We can control who polices your neighborhood. We can control everything. And so this segregation actually put African Americans in a position where, my view, we were subject to greater just whims and winds of the society as they wanted to control the community. The so-called ghetto for white society was not so much of a problem as it was a solution. What I'm saying to you is, if you want to talk about Black criminality, you isolate people, you confine them, you limit their opportunity spatially, and you're going to have certain outcomes.
Well, wait a minute. You sound as if you talk as if it's a conspiracy where some external force is forcing people to live. Well, people are voting with their feet. Excuse me, Keith. People, including Black people, are voting with their feet. This is one of William Julius Wilson's points from way back when, where Black, upperly mobile and middle-class people moving out of concentrated poverty areas and so forth. That Milliken versus Bradley Supreme Court case that limited the ability to impose
from Detroit. I know about that
busing. So, I mean, it's not like there's an evil force in the world that's making the segregation. It's a consequence of complex historical dynamics.
But Glenn, redlining was done and sponsored by the FHA. Bro.
Keith, you're not going to like this, but I got to step in here. Most people who were redlined were white. Talk about a conspiracy. It's almost as if people don't want us to know that. Most redlining affected poor white people. There's studies that show it. I wrote a piece about it in the Times a couple years ago. And the white people who were redlined did not magically start doing the sorts of things that we're talking about just because they were all corralled together in lousy neighborhoods. A disproportionate number of Black poor people were redlined, but most of that affected very white people.
But are you denying that redlining did not affect Black people?
It affected Black people in that it wasn't fair, but it doesn't explain what you're calling the criminality. Because most people who were redlined didn't become criminals in that proportion.
But look, those same white people, there was never any laws that they couldn't read. There was never any laws that they didn't have. They weren't impacted by lynching. Lynching is decidedly racialized. No, I commend both you guys to go down to the Equal Justice Institute and have Brian Stevens to give you a tour. I think it will blow your mind down in Montgomery. So you're talking about racial terrorism coupled with all these things. So, you know, I'm not aware of this study that says that white people were redlined and racially segregated. Now, let me just tell you though, but like, Smith v. Allwright, the end of the right primary, we had to, the United States Supreme Court had to say that racial covenants were illegal, right? Then voting, then you couple all these things together. I'm not saying that nothing bad ever happened to anybody white. As a matter of fact, let me just remind you, I represent a state where 85% of my constituents are white. I talk to white people in pain every day and all the time. There's no question about it. I think we should discuss it more. But my point is, if you're talking about why do Black people, why are they associated with elevated levels of violent crime? I'm telling you that I think that it's far more complicated than some conservatives, I'm not speaking for you guys, want to imply. I'm saying that I'm saying that when you couple all of these and compound these experiences together, redlining, voting denial, lynching, I mean, you end up in a certain kind of situation. Let me tell you, if you live in Indiana, for many decades, the whole state was controlled by the Ku Klux Klan.
The last official lynching was in Indiana, actually.
Yeah, that's not Black Father. That's not Black Fathers. That's the Klan. So I think that, look, I'm not saying that the whole thing about family dynamics don't have an important role in the conversation. I'm saying that we overplay it and we don't look at what the larger society is doing. And Glenn, you were saying, Keith, are you saying there's a conspiracy? I'm saying that, there's all kind of racial conspiracies in our country. The Chinese Exclusion Act was about the Chinese. Japanese internment was Japanese. Okay. Immigration was, Jim Crow was about denial of Black people. So I know we live in a moment where, Ron DeSantis don't want to talk about that, but it's in the historical record and it is a critical part of how we solve these problems. Take it in consideration.
Glad to give you the opportunity to so effectively express your point of view, which I don't think I share or John, but I respect it. I want to ask you about policing again.
Let's go.
Because one of the things that really did strike me about that documentary, The Fall of Minneapolis, was their accounting of the burning to the ground of the 3rd Precinct headquarters, and of the demoralization that had on the cops. And of course, Keith, I agree with you, bad cops need to be held accountable, full stop. Nothing else to say about that. They're subject to the law just like anybody else, and more power to you for enforcing the law against bad cops when the law so requires. But the morale of the police department is not an insignificant thing, and letting that police station be burnt to the ground was a horrible thing for me to witness. And I just wonder how you feel about it.
Yeah, that was extremely unfortunate, and it was horrible, quite honestly, and it definitely shook a lot of people in Minneapolis to see that.
These people keep telling me it wasn't burnt to the ground. What are the facts on that? I really don't know.
It was burnt to the point where no human being could survive if you were inside of it at the burning. It was burnt to the point. We'll put it like this: Are there some bricks standing on top of other bricks? Yes,
but it was burned to the ground.
Yeah, okay. It was burned beyond any and all functionality. You can't rebuild it. It wasn't like there was a fire with 1 or 2 rooms.
Okay.
They burned it down. But I will say this: The people who did it were prosecuted and are serving sentences now, and that is extremely important. And I don't think any of them were black. Maybe one of them was, but several of them were not. You know, I mean, and some of them were not even from Minnesota.
It's always like that.
This situation attracted extremely negative people who wanted to foment pain, suffering, and crazy and chaos. You know, and I think they wanted to do it for a lot of reasons, but one of them was the peaceful protest of what happened to George Floyd, in my view, was righteous. How do you tarnish the peaceful First Amendment protected raising of voices, say this abuse of government power is wrong? Well, you infiltrate the group, and you do things that the group will be held responsible for. So I thought that was very bad, and so I think it was a horrible thing. Let me just tell you.
I'm sorry. I just want to, excuse me for interrupting. I just want to understand you. You're saying pro-police elements infiltrated the anti-police mob.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Because I don't think the Boogaloo Boys are pro-police. I think they're pro-chaos.
Okay.
You follow? So let's be clear. No way I'm saying that these people were in favor of the police. What they're in favor of is fomenting chaotic, crazy situation.
Okay, so they're anarchists.
You know what? I know anarchists who would never do anything violent like that, but yeah, I would say that they are people who want disorder. You know,
where are you on Antifa?
Look, man, Antifa is not so much of a group as it is a movement, and it is a movement of like 100 years ago. It means anti-fascism, and I think that it is a term that the right, I meant to say right wing, has lifted up to sort of like create boogeymen. So like they're saying Antifa's responsible for January 6th. No, it isn't, right? Now, look, you know, I think that they're not big enough to make a big deal about it. I think if they commit crimes, they should be held accountable. I don't think that they're anywhere close to the security threat that organized white supremacy hate is. And they're not comparable. They're not good people on both sides. You know, one is an existential threat to American democracy, and the other one is some pissed off kids. And if they break windows, charge them with breaking windows. Next. Okay. You know, so that's the way I think about it. I mean, and let me just tell you this whole defund the police thing, which I was never for. In fact, there are Scopes articles showing how I was never for defund the police.
I was going to get to that.
Well, let me just jump the gun. Let me tell you, Mike Johnson, you know who he is? He's a speaker.
Yeah, he's the mayor of Dallas.
He's a speaker of the House of Representatives in the United States.
Oh, that guy. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
The other Mike Johnson.
Right.
He wants to cut the ATF, the FBI, and the DOJ. Is he defund the police? I think he is. Let me tell you, defund the police was an unfortunate term used by some. Hear me out now, Glenn, before I lose you. In the wake of the murder of George Floyd, there was some very angry young people who I believe had a reason to be upset. And they used some, what I think, irresponsible language, which then got weaponized into some national rhetoric. I don't know one Democratic politician who ran on the banner of defund the police. Why? Because it's stupid, right? Now, I will say that we should pay care to the budget of the Department of Recreation, Education, school lunches, after school programs. If we cut all those programs and send the money to the police department, we're not doing the upstream preventative work that we could be doing. So there is a budget conversation to be had about what's the proper allocation, right? But defund the police was dumb, is dumb, and mostly it was blown out of proportion by the right wing. I was in Wisconsin. They were accusing Mandela Barnes of defund the police. I'm like, what? So it got politicized to a very high degree.
Do you think there's a problem with police morale issues, not just in Minneapolis, but around the country?
Yeah, there is. There is. And we've got to do something about it. But I'm going to tell you what I think we should do about it is that we should say that high standards are important. See, a lot of people want to say public criticism of policing is why we have bad morale. I would say to you that Derek Chauvin is the reason we have bad morale. Those 5 guys who killed Tyree Nichols is the reason we have bad morale. If I got a minute to tell you a story about a good police officer and the way the department handled the situation hurt morale. So there's a woman named Carrie L. Horn. And 20 years ago, she and her white male partner went into a house, made some arrests. She cuffed her person, she walked him out. And she noticed that the other guy was still in there. So she goes in there, and this guy is banging on a cuffed defendant, or he's not even a defendant yet. He's just a suspect. And she tries to verbally intervene, and then she tries to physically say, you cannot beat this man like this. You know, he punches her. She's like, you know, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. You violated departmental policy. You're not supposed to do this. Well, somebody got in trouble. It was her. She ended up getting investigated and fired, and she didn't get her pension restored till about 2 years ago. Carrie L. Horn. Now, in the meantime, the officer who beat this suspect ends up getting caught doing it again and gets charged with a federal civil rights crime and does prison time for it. I'm saying that the way back to police morale is to say, look, if you obey the rules of this department, there's very, 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 very little chance that you're going to end up in trouble. And then we need to recruit I think we recruit too heavily around people with like military backgrounds. I mean, look at policing today. Look at how much crime is caught up in, say, computers. Do you really need to be able to run a mile under 5 minutes to be a good computer, a cop that fights, internet crime? And what about rape and sexual assault? You need somebody with the level of sensitivity to interview those people who've been victimized that way. I mean, I think that our model for who's going to be a good cop has been male, has been military background, has been Caucasian in many times. And I think we need to expand our recruiting. I also think that we need to use technology more, even, particularly in terms of vehicle stop. Like if I say I run through a red light, that's dangerous. Well, do you need to get in a high-speed chase, or do you just need to make sure that computer identifies that person and that person gets a ticket? Or there's a lot of ways we can reduce some of these very dangerous on-scene traffic stop situations. Now, sometimes police is going to be dangerous. I mean, you got mass shooters, you got some of these domestic calls, which can be very dangerous, and you're going to need, somebody who can put some muscle mass and force on the situation. And I think we recruit too. We got plenty of people like that. We don't have people who are good in computers, who are good at sympathy and empathy with victims. And I think we need to do more with that.
Okay. Listen, while we have you for a few more minutes, I want to change the subject slightly. Yeah, sure. You are one of the first Muslim members of the United States House of Representatives, if not the first. You are the first. There is a big controversy going on within the Democratic Party. Some people are calling the president Genocide Joe, and they're making life miserable for some Democratic politicians by objecting to U.S. policy in the war between Israel and Gaza. I'm wondering how you read that situation as a member of the Democratic Party and a professional politician with a presidential election that looks very, very close, just a few months away.
Right. Well, again, Glenn, I know that you and I aren't going to agree on this, but I think that President Trump is an existential threat to American democracy. I can name 10 reasons why I think so, but that's where I put it. So I think re-electing
I agree with you, Keith.
Right. So I think re-electing Joe Biden is fundamental and essential. And I think that Joe Biden has insisted upon humanitarian relief and has even called for a ceasefire, and actually did not block the last ceasefire resolution in the United Nations. That's why Netanyahu canceled the visit. I think, but I also think that some people are naive about the U.S. relationship between the United States and Israel. It's not based on one president. I think that if you want to change in that relationship, and what you want to see is that Israel and the United States relate much more like the United States and the United Kingdom, United States and Canada. If you want to see that kind of arrangement where there can be disagreements, there can be arguments, where if you don't do this, then we're going to do that. You want that. It's going to take more than one presidency. And because, you got to give the people who are pro-Israel credit. They have been working hard on this for literally decades, and they have done a good job. And I would say they're as successful as, well, actually, they're more successful than the NRA is, because they've actually taken some setbacks. But they're a powerful group in terms of and it's not because of some anti-Semitic conspiracy. It's because of many years of work and relationship cultivation over a long period of time. And so I think that if we do need a two-state solution, I think that Netanyahu is certainly bad for Israel and the United States. I think we need a new election, and we need somebody in Israel who sees that we can't do this every 2 or 3 years. Every 2 or 3 years, back to, the Israelis are fighting in Hamas in Gaza. We're going to have to come to a solution that is stable. And that means Palestinian state, democratic, peaceful, and working on solving the problems of their people, like food, water, clothing, shelter, things like that.
So you would tell your colleagues on the left of the party to stand down and not jeopardize Joe Biden's reelection?
I don't tell them stand down. What I tell them is that my opinion is Joe Biden needs to be reelected. Joe Biden is willing to talk about how the United States can support its ally Israel and have a Palestinian state. And I remind them that it was Trump who said, let's have a Muslim ban. It was Trump who said, finish the job when asked about Gaza. It was Trump who, falsely said that Muslims were celebrating at 9/11. And I mean, you talk about jumping out of the frying pan into the fire? Come on, think about this. And then, but on the other hand, Clint, you are talking about people whose loved ones are being killed in Gaza. I got a good friend who I won't say her last name, but I'll say her first name. Her name is Hala, and she's a well-respected political activist in San Francisco, and she has had well over 100 members of her family killed and many more than that injured. So there is an emotional aspect to this that I just hope that we understand, which is why I didn't publicly attack people when they said uncommitted. I said, as long as you show up in November, we're good. If you need to vote uncommitted to send a message, I get it, because you saw that in Michigan and in Minnesota, that message was sent. But at the end of the day, that's kind of how I feel about it. We got to return Biden to the White House.
Okay, thanks for that, and thanks for your time this morning. This is Keith Ellison. John, you want to add anything?
Oh, no.
Actually, no. I think this is a good round session.
Can I say this as I wrap up?
Yeah.
First of all, you can get Break the Will anywhere books are sold. It's the true story. It's what really
Fair enough.
Hey, man, there you go. And then
I have my copy with me. But.
Well, and then also let me say that, look, while I would be open to having a truthful, fair dialogue with a person like Liz Collins, it's hard for me to see how a conversation wouldn't devolve into an argument pretty fast. But you guys are able to talk to her, and you can talk to me. We can disagree in an agreeable way. Nobody here has been insulted or been treated unfairly. And I think that in this moment of political polarization, you guys play a very important role. Now, if you ever watch, if you follow my political commentary, you know I don't mind ripping somebody a new one if they got one coming. I'm being sincere. I think you guys are doing a good service. I've listened to some of your stuff, and I'm on the conclusion now that I think that you guys have an important role to play in terms of trying to get people into some conversations that they're just not going to be into, unless somebody with your credibility on both sides does that. I tell people don't dismiss them because they're. I know you're not a black conservative, John, but don't dismiss them because they don't agree with some of the things we say. Listen to them, take them seriously. Don't take what they say personally, and I hope you guys keep at it and have more people from my side of the political fence on, because while you may not agree on a lot of things, you might actually shed some light, because a lot of conservatives do watch your show, and they'll be like, oh, I thought that person was completely crazy. Now I kind of, not completely crazy, but sort of crazy. You know? Anyway, that's all I had to say. Well, thank you. Crazy, but sort of. Oh, I thought that person was completely crazy. Now I kind of, not completely crazy, but sort of crazy. You know? Anyway, that's all I had to say. And then things you might actually shed some light, because a lot of conservatives do watch your show, and they'll be like, oh, I thought that person was completely crazy. Now I kind of, not completely crazy, but sort of crazy. You know? And I hope you dismiss them because I know you're not a conclusion now that I think that political commentary, that in this moment of political in an agreeable way, do an argument pretty fast. I would be open to having go, and then
I don't have my copy with me, but
well, and then also let me say that, look, while I would be open to having a truthful, fair dialogue with a person like Liz Collins, it's hard for me to see how a conversation wouldn't devolve into an argument pretty fast. But you guys are able to talk to her, and you can talk to me. We can disagree in an agreeable way. Nobody here has been insulted or been treated unfairly. And I think that in this moment of political polarization, you guys play a very important role. Now, if you ever watch, if you follow my political commentary, you know I don't mind ripping somebody a new one if they got one coming. I'm being sincere. I think you guys are doing a good service. I've listened to some of your stuff, and I'm on the conclusion now that I think that you guys have an important role to play in terms of trying to get people into some conversations that they're just not going to be into, unless somebody with your credibility on both sides does that. I tell people don't dismiss them because I know you're not a black conservative, John, but don't dismiss them because they don't agree with some of the things we say. Listen to them, take them seriously. Don't take what they say personally, and I hope you guys keep at it and have more people from my side of the political fence on, because while you may not agree on a lot of things, you might actually shed some light, because a lot of conservatives do watch your show, and they'll be like, oh, I thought that person was completely crazy. Now I kind of, not completely crazy, but sort of crazy. You know? Anyway, that's all I had to say. Well, thank y'all for having me on, okay?
Thanks very much, Keith. We really appreciate it, man.
You got it.
Okay.